Thank you for starting the conversation at your tables. And I hope that you got a little bit of a sense of where each other is coming from. We're good. We kind of know what appeals in this presentation and why we're here. Thank you for doing that. So I'm going to kick off my part of this presentation today by telling you two things that I suspect you do not want to hear. So the first thing is that I don't consider myself to be an expert in building nonprofit communications capacity. And the second thing is that my view is that building capacity is going to be entirely up to you. It's going to be your responsibility. So let's tackle the first point. Why am I here? Why am I here to deliver a presentation on building nonprofit communications capacity if I'm not an expert in the subject area? Well, when I was invited to speak at this event, I asked Marco, the Maitree team member who invited me, why he saw me as a good fit. I wanted to ensure that I could deliver what he and what you are seeking here today. And Marco highlighted what he saw as my ability to bring forth knowledge from a group. I can do that. So while I will start today by sharing some thoughts, my thoughts, I will be focusing most of our time on bringing forth ideas from this group of smart communicators. That's my main objective for today. And I'd like to quickly elaborate a little bit on where Marco was coming from. As Marcus mentioned, since April of last year, I've been building and growing an online community for people who deliver nonprofit communications. And I've included it on the list of 5 good resources. It's called the Nonprofit Mark Community. I've also left little cards on the table here for the blog. So we offer a blog, and the blog itself is rich with how-to posts to help you do your job as communicators. And we also offer a Twitter chat. And that Twitter chat is called the NPMC Twitter chat. It's also on your handout. And it happens on the last Thursday of each month. So this might sound a little self-promotional to start off by talking about what I do, but because I run the blog and I run the chat. But they are completely free. Pardon me. They're completely free, and what makes them good is the community. It's a community full of smart members who participate and contribute and help each other. So, and I know there are people in this room who are already among them, and I hope more of you will be when we finish this presentation. So in preparing for today's session, I turned to the community for insights and advice. And today I'm going to start by sharing what I have already learned from your peers about 3 things. So what nonprofit communications capacity means, what nonprofits can achieve with greater communications capacity, and ideas on how to build your capacity to communicate. And then I'm going to turn the conversation over to you so that we can find more answers and more solutions from within this group. So let's start with what does nonprofit communications capacity mean? For me, to start my research, I asked our LinkedIn group, because we have one of those as well, and our Twitter chat participants to share what communications capacity means to them. And I found the range of responses very interesting because it was a wide range. So here's a sampling. Our capacity to communicate is influenced by a wide range of factors, including time, not surprising, human resources, including both staff and volunteers, budgets or funding, skills, knowledge, and expertise, partners, strategy, and tools. Also important, the degree of our external engagement with key stakeholders, the number of communications channels a nonprofit is using, the quality of our communications, I like this one, our ability to be nimble and responsive, and the organization's ability to understand, support, and buy into the importance of marketing communications. And then to dig just a little bit deeper, I pulled a few additional points from research conducted by the Communications Leadership Institute and Spitfire Strategies, who identified these, what they called their nonprofit communications capacity hotspots, among what I've already mentioned and among others. A lack of planning, trouble prioritizing, and message definition and consistency as a factor. So our capacity to communicate is affected by a very wide range of factors, and what's starting to emerge is the idea that to build capacity, we need to tackle those areas over which we as communicators truly have control. But before we go there, I'm also interested in why we should be concerned about building our capacity to communicate. Maybe you have an insight from the exercise you started, and hopefully folks were sharing on Twitter as well. But what might greater communications capacity, what might it mean for us and for the communities that we serve? So when I'm curious, I ask the question. I ask the group, what might greater communications capacity mean for you? Why do you want to build your communications capacity? What's the end goal? I wanted to understand what we would be able to accomplish as communicators for our nonprofits and for those that we serve with greater capacity. And here are the answers. The ability to connect meaningfully with our communities. Being more innovative and less reactive or tactical. More acquisition and retention of donors. The ability to adopt emerging technology earlier. Increased visibility for our organizations. Greater clarity in the messages that we deliver. A more attractive organization to funders. Also to partners, donors, and new talent, including employees and volunteers. A more sustainable organization, and most important, a greater impact or greater return for those who benefit from our work. So this is a great, rich variety of responses, and they all make perfect sense in terms of our end goals. So, of course, we do want to build capacity if it will help us to achieve these things. But how do we get there? How do we get to this place of more meaningful connections and relationships, of clarity in our messaging, of more visible, sustainable organizations, and most importantly, of greater impact? I'm going to take a drink before I tell you how we get there. You can only say nonprofit communications capacity so many times without getting thirsty. So when I ask communicators what it would take, what would it take to achieve greater communications capacity, and all of the possibility that it presents, the answers are not as varied. The most pressing needs for nonprofit communicators seem to be skill development, and most prominent of all, more time and more resources. So does that sound familiar? No big surprise there. In fact, each year, Kivi LaRue Miller of the Nonprofit Marketing Guide conducts a huge survey of nonprofits and releases the Nonprofit Communications Trends Report. And this year, over 2,100 respondents participated, and the early results of the 2014 report are out, indicating that the #1 challenge for nonprofit communications pros is a lack of time to produce quality content, and the #2 challenge is a lack of budget for direct expenses. So what this means is that doing more with less is simply part of the reality of being a nonprofit communicator. And that brings us back to the second point, the second thing I felt you might not want to hear at the beginning of the presentation, that building communications capacity is largely going to have to be right in your hands. So, if we feel that those factors that limit our capacity to communicate are part of our culture and part of the sector that we're working in, and we choose to work and we want to work here, what can we do? Of course, we should be advocates for the value of an investment in communications. We should be working to forge strategic partnerships and to engage key stakeholders. But when it comes to our day-to-day work and our ability to achieve more, I think there are a number of things that we can address right now. So I'm going to share my ideas, and these ideas are based on the conversations I've had before today, and then I'm sure we will unearth many together. My first idea is to think smaller. This might sound odd at first. Nonprofit mandates are visionary, they're huge. And as a result, often so are our communications goals. And our goals should be aligned with and leading us toward achieving our broader vision. But to be truly effective, we have to give ourselves permission to succeed at a small scale and then build. And what I have in mind here are the communities that we're trying to engage. We have to conduct communications planning with realistic, specific audiences in mind and achievable goals. So when it comes to your campaigns, your publications and promotions, think smaller. Focus in on a defined specific group that you're trying to reach and engage with, and then do so meaningfully. Say goodbye forever, and you've heard this many times before, but say goodbye to the general public as an audience, and think instead about who your true stakeholders are and who you want them to be. And there's another aspect to this think smaller idea that I want to offer, and that is to focus on the basics and then grow. If you need it, give yourself time to get your basics in order. For example, Do you have clearly defined communications objectives that relate back to your organization's strategic priorities? Have you established clear key messages that are aligned with your nonprofit's brand? Do you have solid core materials, including visual identity and messaging guidelines, presentation templates, media kits, marketing materials, and a well-written, well-designed website? If not, start there and get those items in order. I see laughter in the room, so maybe not. And this brings me to my next resource recommendation, which is a book by the name of Brand Raising by Sarah Durham. Has anyone read Brand Raising? No? Oh, well, then a lot of people are in for a good read. It's a really, really good book for many reasons. And I think what's really incredible about this book is the very specific guidance that it offers in the area of getting your basics, including your brand and your messaging platform, in order. So again, it's called Brand Raising by Sarah Durham. And once you have the basics in order, you'll feel like you have a foundation from which to grow your communications. So give yourself permission to think smaller and to spend time on the basics. My second idea is to stop doing one old thing so you can try one new thing. So let me know if this sounds familiar. You feel that you are at full capacity, yet you feel pressure to take on more projects. Sound familiar? Yeah, okay. And this might be for a number of reasons. It might be because of internal demands and internal priorities. It might be because of new partnerships, or it might be because of you. It might be because there are emerging technologies and tools that you would like to try and feel you should, but you need to have space to do so. So I think there's one simple way to make room for the new, and that is out with the old. Stop doing something. Pick one thing, stop doing one thing, because there's a very good chance that there is at least one ongoing project, and it should be something that's ongoing, activity or publication that can be dropped. And it may not be easy, it might not be popular, but if you're at full capacity and you plan to add more, something has to go. So critique your work. Are you still implementing something that has lost its appeal or lost its relevance to your audience? Is there a tactic that is simply not getting the intended results? Or is there something that you're doing for no better reason than because you or your organization has always done it? Question everything. And if you can't drop something altogether, but you've identified it, scale it back in scope or in frequency or in resources or time allocated to it. Now, if you want to take this idea one step further, audit your communications. So review where you are succeeding and where your communications are falling short. Do a full analysis of your activities, your materials, your coverage, and your community engagement. An audit will help you to identify what's working and what you can drop. And it will also reveal what knowledge, skills, and training are most important for you to develop. So this brings me to the third resource for today, and it's a very simple one. It's actually just a blog post. It's an article from Nancy Schwartz of gettingattention.org. And get ready if you're planning on Googling this, because she calls it her no pain, all gain, do it now nonprofit communications audit. But it's on your sheet, it's on the resources. And in this article, Nancy outlines some simple steps and questions to ask in order to conduct your own communications audit. She really breaks it down and makes it quite simple. But the important thing here is to make space to experiment and to make space to try something new that excites you, is relevant to your community, and supports your objectives. Because the ability and the room to innovate is a big part of growing your capacity. All right, third idea. Am I speaking too quickly? I always speak too quickly. No, okay. Leverage more of what you already have. So you're not going to get more. We've established that it's not likely you're going to get more in terms of budget or in terms of human resources. If that's the case, you have to sharpen your focus on leveraging what you do already have. And I think you should start with your content. Now, the content creation process is time and resource intensive, so put your content to work for you over time. Here's where to start. Make each piece of content that you create something to be proud of. And then, every time you write copy, take a photo, or shoot video, consider how it can be used or refreshed for other channels. for a blog post, in your annual report, a Facebook or Google Plus update, a direct mail piece or an email campaign. Just always have that perspective when you're creating content. And then support this thinking and this process by creating more efficiencies and systems to support it. Photo and video libraries, an archive system for stories, testimonials, and other content. Create a repository for your content and then a way for those who need it to access it. And if you're concerned by this idea and you're thinking this is too much recycling, I want you to remember these 3 things. The first is not everyone is reading everything that you publish, as much as we like to think that they are. They're not. The second is that different people do like to consume information in different ways. And the third, as communicators, we already know that we have to repeat our main messages several times across multiple channels. So don't be shy about offering your content in different formats. This is not about copying and pasting. I'm not advocating that. I'm a copywriter. I'm all about fresh copy. But it is about remixing and repurposing, about tweaking your message and your content to make it relevant for your different audiences. I just want to share another example of this kind of thinking. You're filming a video interview with some form of subject matter expert for use on your website. So use it as you originally intended, and then also capture a photo of the video shoot in progress and share that on Facebook or Twitter to whet appetites and build anticipation. Publish a quote or a short excerpt of the interview to share in your next email newsletter. Use short clips of the video in your corporate video when you're putting it together. Perhaps transcribe the interview for a blog post, and maybe grab the audio to use in that new podcast you're developing for your nonprofit. So just make sure that the content offers value each time, but this is just an example of how to be thinking about everything you produce, everything you create. And once it becomes a habit, you'll likely be able to apply this remix thinking to your partnerships, your spokespeople or ambassadors, team members, your own skills, roles and responsibilities, just always thinking about how to leverage what you have. Because limited resources are part of your reality, so leveraging what you have is key. 4th idea, invest in yourself. We've identified in the conversations I've had so far that personal development is important. Because if you build your skills and expertise, you'll be able to make better decisions about where to deploy your limited resources, what new ideas are worth pursuing, and you'll also fuel creativity for how you'll be leveraging your existing assets like content. So make a plan, make a specific plan to keep abreast of marketing communications trends and the emerging technology and channels that are available to you. And then make sure it's the plan that you can pursue on your own, with or without the support of your employer. There are so many forms of continuing education and learning available, from very pricey to completely free of charge. So I just want to talk about some of those, some of the obvious and maybe some you haven't thought of. So of course, university courses and books like the book I already recommended, conferences. But when it comes to conferences, I'd like to suggest, instead of just the usual suspects, consider one of the inexpensive or free local mini conferences that tend to happen. And here in Toronto, a couple of examples are Social Media Week, or PodCamp is coming up in February. Take advantage of online communities, including Facebook and LinkedIn groups, Google Plus communities or Twitter chats, free or paid webinars. It's amazing to me what amazing learning you can get from the free webinars. So just do your research, and I suggest a couple of sources: Charity How To and nonprofit webinars. Online courses and conferences. These are not nonprofit specific, but have a look at the courses from Marketing Profs University, and consider online conferences such as the Social Media Success Summit. A lot of these are very, very tactical, but they will really help you with your day-to-day roles. And then there are newsletters and blogs, of course, which are great for those who like a steady stream of digestible chunks of information on a variety of topics. And podcasts. I love this one. This is my latest obsession almost. You can learn while you commute, exercise, or in my case, while you do the dishes. And they're free, and you're doing something else, but you're adding value to what you're doing. And I personally find that the variety and quality of podcasts is improving almost daily. There are just a few that I found that touch on nonprofit marketing, but many, many available to inspire you in marketing communications in general and to help you keep up with the latest trends. And many of these options that I've mentioned, especially the last few, also allow you to get familiar with new platforms, which is something you might need to consider as your nonprofit is pushed into the world of content marketing. Because if you're using and consuming YouTube shows, podcasts, and blogs, you'll get a better understanding of the experience as a consumer first. And then as a result, the idea of implementing any of these will be much less intimidating. And this idea of investing in your own development brings me to my next resource recommendation, which is the Nonprofit Technology Conference. This conference is presented by the Nonprofit Technology Network, and though it is tech-focused, it has a significant communication stream and excellent networking. I went for the first time last year, and it's very inexpensive. The conference itself is very inexpensive. This year, it's taking place in Washington, D.C., so the accommodations cost will be more, but they offer an online version called Online NTC, and that's super, super inexpensive. And if this event doesn't hit your radar this year, the Nonprofit Technology Network, they put out a blog, newsletter, and webinars to keep you updated year-round. So it's worth checking out if you haven't heard of them. But whatever resources or training you choose, make a commitment and a plan and an investment, perhaps, in your own learning. Because the more you learn, the more you do build your capacity to communicate on behalf of your nonprofit today and your own career going forward. So don't leave this up to someone else. My last idea, the fifth idea, is to schedule productivity. So I believe that in terms of accomplishing more and getting the most out of your existing time and resources, especially time, the most important idea of anything I've mentioned today is to find ways to boost your productivity, to being productive as opposed to being busy. So this might sound counterintuitive. There's a lot of giggles. People are too busy, I think, and not productive maybe. I don't know. But my suggestion is to schedule more. So what I mean here is to schedule your priorities. Schedule productivity into your day, into your week. Schedule your various hats or your various projects. Schedule your learning, as I was just discussing, and schedule less meeting time. I'll get to that in a minute. And this brings me to my final resource recommendation, which is your calendar and a timer. Because I have a couple of techniques that I think can go a very long way. And the most important of these is designating specific periods of time in your day, every day, to creating, writing, planning, and otherwise producing. Schedule productivity periods. So these are non-negotiable, distraction-free periods of time during which you focus only on one project or task and shut out any distractions. They can be 20 minutes, 30 minutes, or my favorite, or my preference, is 50 minutes. Because I find that 50 minutes is the perfect length of time for me to get into a groove and accomplish a significant amount. So close the door. I know you're wondering, how am I going to do this? Close the door, work from home, work in a meeting room. I don't know if this will work in your workplace, but maybe hang a do not disturb sign on the back of your chair. But communicate that what you're doing and why you're doing it, and then do it. Ignore all of your phone calls, emails, social media, internet searches, unless they're related to the task at hand, and make a commitment to 50 minutes, or whatever time frame works for you, of focused, uninterrupted productivity. It will all still be there when you're done. So just get work done and come back to all of the rest. And because communicators are often folks wearing other hats, which we definitely saw when Marcus asked the room today, you can combine this idea with also scheduling productivity for your specific hats or your specific projects. So look at your schedule at the beginning of the week and designate a time of day or day of the week to each hat or core activity to make sure you can keep all of your projects moving and then have room for the more that you want to deliver. And you likely have project plans in place. So open up those project plans, pull out the activities, and put them right on your calendar. And combine this idea with your fourth idea, which is to schedule learning. Whether it's lunchtime, the first hour of certain weekdays, Friday mornings, or time on the weekend, build time into your schedule to learn and stay current. Put it on your calendar. Carve out at least an hour a week, but definitely more if you can handle it. And then meetings. Don't let meetings kill your productivity. I'm interested. How many people in the room would like to spend more time in meetings every day? I didn't think so. I thought not. So schedule meetings wisely and keep certain times of day off limits. Now I realize this all depends on your culture and your context in your nonprofit, but I have some specific suggestions here. Change your default meeting length. So most of us think of meetings in general as 1 hour as a default. Does that sound accurate? So I don't know why that is. Does anyone know why? I don't think there's a good reason. So we just schedule them that way. And then we tend to fill that hour, regardless of whether we really needed to spend that time in a meeting room or on a conference call. So consider limiting meetings to 30 minutes as a default instead of 1 hour. This might sound revolutionary, but I strongly suspect you can make it work. And definitely apply this when you invite others to meetings that you're hosting. Book them for 30 minutes and be super efficient. And then when invited, you know whether this will work for you or not, but consider asking whether a meeting can be kept to 30 or 45 minutes. Doubling your productivity here, right with that one move, 30-minute meetings instead of 1 hour. And they often can be, just nobody's thinking about that. No one's considering half-hour meetings. And protect your schedule. So you've scheduled all of this awesome productivity and learning in. Now don't allow meetings to encroach on that time. Really protect it and rearrange your schedule if you have to, but preserve the time that you've allocated to those things. Okay, so hopefully I didn't go too quickly through everything. I am a fast talker, but we've talked about 5 ideas so far. Thinking smaller, stopping one old activity or tactic and trying one new, leveraging more of what you already have, especially your content, investing in yourself, and scheduling productivity.